Hello, welcome to Matters of Decorum. I'm Scott Corum. This is what matters to me. My last video, I got a comment from Joe Taylor, um, asking me if I would do a video on the pros and cons of the series of Dungeons and Dragons and which I liked best. By a series, I'm presuming you're meaning editions. Thank you very much for your comment and your question, Joe. Okay, series of Dungeons and Dragons editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Of which there have been, I'm going to break it down into 7. First edition Dungeons and Dragons, Advanced D&D, Second edition Advanced, 3, 3.5, 4, 5. I had the white box set with the blue and white cover, that very first edition. I was too young to understand it at the time. Not really up to the mental capabilities of parsing out all the rules and the numbers. I like some of the pictures. I had some figures. I drew maps. I was about, 10, 11, maybe 12 at the time. And I can't say I know much about this edition. I have gone back and played some more recently. A friend of mine ran the original Tomb of Horrors in first edition, and that was an experience. Hardcore fantasy war game simulation played out in more detail. Dungeons and Dragons started off, and you can really see its origins here as a war game, as having figures out on a field and you're moving in troops and stuff, and those movement rules and those combat rules got refined down into something where you could focus on an individual character and maybe not always be moving it around a battlefield, but discussing what happens within taverns afterwards, and kind of took off running. Advanced, more of this, got it a little bit more into developing the characters and some different paths the characters could take, more proficiency slots and how skills could work. Again, fleshing it out is still mostly a combat system trying to be a role-playing game. Second edition Advanced. Oh god. I logged so many hours playing that. That was where they were at when my high school group started up, where I really started to play D&D. And those books would come out, and I just have my copy. Oriental Adventures, Unearthed Arcana, and everything was new and fresh. The mechanics were still, I'm going to say, clunky, and yeah, I'll probably get arguments about that, but if you did not have the chart in the book memorized, you were always referencing the chart in the book. And all I need to do is say THACO for someone who is familiar with the system to know what I'm talking about, because you had to calculate your 2-hit armor class 0, THACO. And depending on what your bonuses were and what the other armor classes involved are, and you knew where the chart was, you were good. That was a lot of second edition Advanced. If you knew where the charts were, you were good, and there was enough landmarks in the books with good art to help you find where the charts were. Artwork was spectacular, and things were expanding all the time in that system. It was still a clunky war game that was just getting more and more detailed as time went on. Me and my friends did a lot of theater of the mind. It's where I picked up my style of running, where you didn't necessarily need the figures out on the board. You could just imagine the scene and describe what was going on, and things often worked out much better that way. Um, third edition. I liked third edition a lot because what third edition did primarily was unify a lot of the mechanics and simplify a lot. It was no longer necessary to continually research charts in the player's handbook or the dungeon master's guide. The information on the character sheet was often enough for you to know whether you would have succeeded or failed at a given task. The skill system was made much more robust. A lot more options were introduced into the system. Some things that had been lore in earlier editions became, or things that were fan lore in earlier editions, or things that had been spread out throughout a number of different books, gathered together in one place and unified and made into something that was a fairly cohesive whole with some problems. Not everything worked out. They probably could have done a little bit more play testing. Some of the classes were unbalanced. Some of the gameplay did not flow well. So we got Dungeons and Dragons 3.5. Another three $40 books to buy at a minimum. That was your purchase to entry. That's Player's Handbook, Monster Manual, DMG, Dungeon Master's Guide. If you're going to be a Dungeon Master. As pretty as second edition had tried to get to. 3 had amazing art across the board and made good art choices. The art direction was exemplary. And 3.5 just picked up with most of that. Maybe a few tweaks to the art here and there, tweaking the systems, make sure the classes are balanced. 3.5, about as good as it was going to get, using the D20 rules that they came up with, that they put out the open game license for, around which there were some troubles, but that's not what we're talking about today. Then there was 4th edition. Fourth edition was kind of disappointing and kind of a step backwards. They simplified what they had come up with so far and tried to unify so many mechanics across the board. It was, it dropped some of the complexity that was starting to make the systems interesting in 3 and 3.5, and went to making things dead simple and tried very hard to make it like an experience that someone would have online. Tried to make it like a more of a World of Warcraft. You have a limited number of choices, and these choices are on specific rails, and so you're on specific branches and skill trees and what have you. And it was an interesting concept. It was a running jump at this. They married the combat mechanics to the use of miniatures, which is not surprising considering that Wizards of the Coast was owned by Hasbro, a toy company at the time, and you needed the toys to play. And probably the most crushing problem with 4th edition was they had planned for there to be an integrated online service that would run parallel to your book experience. So any gaps in the experience you have with a tabletop game with the books, you could fill in by logging in and doing play online and having access to this stream of information. And the online service, through no fault of the developers, did not happen. And due to an unfortunate tragedy, could not happen. So it wasn't a direction I enjoyed seeing the series of books go. It wasn't an edition. I ran 4th edition. for over a year. I did it through a game store that had a box of the toys, so I could go down and grab a handful of whatever. And this is what we're fighting today, and it worked. But it was somewhat more limiting than it was liberating. It was not a fun version of D&D. That being said, I know there are plenty of people who've picked it up and who really enjoy it. There are people whose first experience it was, and people that it was written up more toward the market for it certainly enjoyed it more than I do, which is fine. My opinion is my opinion, and it's based on this massive history coming before it. Fifth edition, the current edition, is kind of it is absolutely a move forward. And they went back and got some of the things that people really liked from previous editions. It's got a very third edition feel to it, but it's got some of the simplicity and flow of fourth, what they could maintain. It's got some fresh mechanics that are both simple and dynamic, which is very good. I've said before, I'll say it again. The advantage and disadvantage mechanic, where you roll two dice and take the best, or two d20 and take the best d20 if you are at advantage, or you take two dice, two die 20, and take the worst of them if you're at disadvantage, is so simple and beautiful that it makes me sick because I didn't think of it. I like fifth a lot. It's a and again, all you need is the character sheet. You don't need to go back and refer to charts all the time, unless you're advancing. You get every level you get all the information you need to play that level, a few notes on the character sheet, and a couple of calculations, and you are off and running with just the character sheet and a die. There's a lot of information to keep track of. So they've sold cards for keeping track of your spells and whatnot, and I usually print really small on my character sheet so I can get all the details in there, but it's all good stuff to have. Characters are diverse. There is a tremendous amount of diversity within each character class. There's a lot of options, a lot of different branches that you can take as the characters develop, so that everyone in the group can start off playing a human fighter, and by 5th or 6th level, they will bear no resemblance to each other. I like that a lot. It is easy for me to say that I like fifth the most because that's what I'm playing right now. And there's a certain appeal to me in the current edition. It's the one that's being supported. It's the one I can go out and I can find games of. And it is enough of a callback to previous editions that if I know people who have played previous editions, I can onboard them with 5th edition pretty quickly. That being said, nothing is ever going to beat those first few walking into a 10-foot by 10-foot room in the center of which is a chest which is being guarded by an orc. That's some exciting stuff. Or long nights at my desk in my room with my giant pad of graph paper marking out potential dungeons and imagining what encounters within them might have looked like. Where are the monsters? What traps can I put in here? What fanciful things? The original sources of third-party lore. My copy of Grimtooth's Traps and Grimtooth's Traps 2, TOO, with all these fanciful, imaginative ways to injure people wandering through your dungeon. And then other fantasy games that I got involved in over time. GURPS had a really wonderful fantasy supplement, and has some very eye-opening things to suggest about dungeon ecologies and why your underground structures might want to be a little bit more thought out. Which one of these editions do I like the most? Well, I've got memories with all of them. And, like I said, I've gone back and played first edition within the past few years. And it was an experience. And a good game master made it fun. I had a great group of people around me. We had a stack of characters between us. We were playing Tomb of Horrors. We were not keeping those characters. They were going to be dying right and left here and there. So no matter how many cute little tricks I was able to pull, I lost characters. I had a character just go insane, not because the role said so, but because I couldn't imagine that character not just losing it at some point in time. At first edition, no frills, nothing fancy. Bunch of names for weapons that no one had ever heard before. Sure, I'll take a Beck to Corbin because that does a lot of damage. I love them all. I love them all as the background of what it is I do, even 4th edition. Um, I haven't played any 4th edition. I ran 4th edition, and the people at my table, still gamers. They got into it through this experience, and they had fun. We still tell stories about those games. That was an amazing time. And the 4th edition is pretty much universally reviled. It had problems, but if I had to, if I had to pick one, if I had to seriously dig through my head and come up with my favorite one, I'd probably go to the edition that I've got at hand next to me at any given point in time. Um, I run a number of 5th edition games. I've got 2 I'm running officially at the moment. One for my Wednesday group, the Warriors of Wednesday, and one for an informal group on Sundays that are just looking for some Dungeons and Dragons experience. And I'm always working on material for that, or coming up with new encounters, or working on plotting. And I'll tell you, 5th edition has a wonderful tool set for just imagining the possibilities and implementing them in game. It's got the character choices are robust and varied, and maybe a little bit too much. I used to have a problem with that because with people coming up with homebrews constantly, easier in 5th edition, and supplements coming out all the time, and all these editions of Unearthed Arcana, and they're trying to pump out more material for it. Um, you ask for character concepts, and you start hearing not just races and classes you haven't heard before, but words you've never heard before. And yeah, I'd like to be a half Asimar cleric of death. Okay, okay. Let me Google a couple of those, and we'll go with it, because none of it's all balanced. It's all effectively written and has plenty of support throughout the material. 5th edition is one of the best role-playing games I have seen yet, that gives the dungeon master the ability to not have to say no. Saying no as a dungeon master it's an important skill, but it can often be disruptive to the creative process. See, I'd much rather saying, "Oh, do you want to have to need that?" Which inspires a lot more stress and thought on the part of the person making the request. It's a better bit of communication between player and dungeon master. 5th edition facilitates this really well. First edition because it was first edition. Second edition, or advanced, or second edition advanced because that is where so much of the lore just poured into the system, and so many things that I wanted to see in a role-playing game suddenly showed up in D&D. A third edition because it cleaned things up very nicely. 3.5 because it cleaned up the cleaning up. I can't recommend 4th. Again, I ran it. I had fun. If you've got a good dungeon master or people who really are into it, you can run 4th. It's not one that I think I could pick up again properly. 5th edition is just a refinement that I find most suits me. I can do a lot in 5th edition. I can do other genres in 5th edition. I can branch out a little bit. I can adapt 5th edition to my needs. So if I was going to recommend one or other, my current favorite at the moment, this might change over time, 5th edition. Not hard to tell. Enjoy 5th edition, and I would recommend going to that one if you're going to start. Finding a group that's doing 5th edition, of any group running any of it will be an excellent start. 5th edition is the one I would start with if I had a choice. And I have. Well, I hope I answered your question in this particular ramble. Thank you again, Joe, for asking that. If you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't enjoy the video, give me a thumbs down. Feedback is feedback. Anything else you'd like to hear me talk about? Things you'd like to, questions you'd like me to answer? Feel free to leave me a comment below. I will love getting your comment, and you will love leaving me one. If you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, why not? My channel is awesome. I invite you to hit the subscribe button. And if you do, you might want to hit the notification bell so you're alerted when these videos become available. If you would like to support the channel in a more substantial manner, I invite you to hit me up my Patreon page, www.patreon.com/ScottCorum, and consider donating. Absolutely anything helps, allows me to make better videos more often. In the meantime, thank you very much for watching. I'm Scott Corum. This is what has mattered to me, and I'll see you next time on the next Matters of DeCorum.